In 1866, the map of Europe contained a massive void where a modern superpower should have been. The nation we called Germany didn't exist yet. Instead, Central Europe was a fragile collection of territories waiting for a single spark to bring the old order down. This map shows the fractured reality of the region. It was a dense patchwork of dozens of independent small states, kingdoms, and duchies, each with their own local flags, specific military loyalties, and conflicting ambitions. For centuries, the Austrian Empire had acted as the self-appointed guardian of these states. From the palaces of Vienna, Kaiser Franz Joseph I presided over an aging, multi-ethnic empire that relied on tradition and prestige to maintain control. But by the 1860s, that grip was slipping. To the north, Prussia was building a very different kind of power. While Vienna celebrated its past, Berlin obsessed over its future. The Prussian state was a disciplined machine, governed by officers who spent every day practicing the logistics of modern mobilization. These were two superpowers with incompatible visions for the future. One was a sprawling, traditional empire struggling to hold on to its history. The other was a lean, industrial state hungry for dominance. They were occupying the same vacuum, and only one could survive the collision. Prussia's rise was masterminded by Otto von Bismarck. He dismissed the idea that nations could be unified through speeches or democratic votes. He operated on a far more brutal logic, that the fate of Germany would be decided by blood and iron. To achieve his goal, Bismarck needed to go to war with Austria, but he needed Austria to appear to be the aggressor. He found his opening in the disputed border provinces of Schleswig and Holstein. Prussia and Austria had recently won these territories together, leaving their shared administration in a state of constant, friction-filled tension. Bismarck spent months intentionally sabotaging the peace. He ignored administrative agreements, blocked Austrian proposals, and fueled local unrest until he pushed the Austrian government in Vienna to a state of total diplomatic exhaustion. By the time the first shots were fired, Bismarck had achieved exactly what he intended. He had manipulated the border dispute into a situation where Austria felt forced to mobilize, walking directly into a confrontation Prussia had been rehearsing for years. Before the fighting began, Bismarck moved to ensure Austria had no friends left in Europe. He secured Russian neutrality by supporting the Tsar's suppression of a recent Polish uprising, earning a debt of silence from St. Petersburg. He then turned his attention to France. In a series of meetings, he hinted to Napoleon III that Prussia might look the other way if France expanded its borders later on. It was a hollow promise, but it succeeded in keeping the French army on the sidelines. Finally, he signed a secret treaty with Italy, promising them the Austrian province of Venetia in exchange for an attack from the south. This effectively split the Austrian army in two, forcing them to defend their borders on opposite fronts. While the Austrians relied on traditional marches, Prussia moved at industrial speed. They turned their commercial railway network into a weapon, using trains to concentrate massive numbers of troops at the border in days, while the Austrian infantry was still weeks away from the front. This technological gap extended to the individual soldier. The Austrian muzzleloader required a man to stand up to reload, turning him into a stationary target. The Prussian needle gun used a breech-loading system, allowing soldiers to fire 5 shots for every 1 Austrian shot, all while staying safely pressed against the ground. The Austrian military entered the conflict with a larger tradition, but they were facing an opponent moving on a faster industrial timeline, equipped with weapons that their tactics weren't designed to survive. Everything came to a head in July 1866 at the Battle of Königgrätz. It was a morning of heavy rain and thick mud, where the smoke from thousands of rifles quickly turned the battlefield into a blinding fog. The Austrian center held firm initially, but their bravery met a lethal new reality. Prussian reserves arrived, catching them in a devastating crossfire. The speed of the Prussian needle guns meant there was no pause in the wall of lead hitting the Austrian ranks. Thousands of soldiers died in that mud, young men from across the empire who were still reloading their muskets when the Prussian fire reached them. They were the victims of a tactical era that had ended before they even arrived. By the time the sun set, the traditional military prestige Austria had relied on for generations had simply evaporated. The battle was over, and with it, Austria's status as the leader of the German world. In the wake of the victory, King William and his generals were eager to march into Vienna. They wanted to occupy the Austrian capital and humiliate their rival in the town square. Bismarck fought them with everything he had. He knew that a total conquest would create a permanent enemy on Prussia's southern border. He threatened to resign and even contemplated throwing himself out of a window to stop the king's march. His restraint was purely pragmatic. He wanted a defeated Austria that could be neutralized quickly and eventually turned into a junior partner. By showing mercy, he ensured that Vienna would stay out of any future conflicts Prussia might have with France. The peace terms changed the map forever. Austria was expelled from German affairs and forced to reorganize as the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary. Prussia, meanwhile, annexed its northern neighbors to form the North German Confederation, a massive, unified military and economic bloc. Across the border, France realized too late that they had been outplayed. The collection of weak neighbors they had relied on for security was gone, replaced by a single, highly mobilized neighbor that had just proven it could dismantle an empire in weeks. By proving that a German state could be forged through lightning-fast industrial war, Bismarck didn't just end a border dispute. He established a template for Prussian-led militarism that would go on to challenge France only 4 years later. This victory created the German Empire, setting in motion a new cycle of competition for European supremacy that would ultimately take 2 world wars and nearly a century to resolve.